To Lieutenant Colonel Danny Davis on all of this, a Defense Priorities Senior Fellow Military Expert. You know, you guys see the good Colonel so many times on this network, as we should, but he's the real deal. I always like to point out with some of the honchos we have on, he's been deployed in combat zones at least half a dozen times in his career. He was in Operation Desert Storm, 1991, then to Iraq in 2009, Afghanistan twice. Who signs up twice for that? 2005, 2011, he did. Awarded the Bronze Star Medal for Valor at the Battle of 73 Easting in 1991. I remember that. A second Bronze Star Medal in Afghanistan. You might ask, why are you going through all of this, Neil? Because his experience gives him added gravitas here. For example, if I were talking military strategy and my experience was G.I. Joes, you would say, Neil, we need someone with a little bit more oomph to them. Here's Mr. Oomph. Colonel, it's very good to see you. Thank you for coming.
Pleasure having me back, Neil.
Let me ask you a little bit about, you know, when Jackie was going through this gas rationing story, a lot of it goes back to Russia getting stingy with this stuff. Gazprom, their gas, a state-run facility, is opening the spigot a little bit, but not a lot. And I'm thinking, weren't we supposed to make the Russians suffer? How is it now they're making us suffer?
Right, yeah, that's what I've really been hitting on for quite a few months now. It actually just published a piece earlier today in the national security publication 1945 addressing these very issues and the risk that the West has that these economic sanctions could cause more pain on us and could potentially cause us to withdraw some of our support for Ukraine as people, for example, in Spain, who are not at all happy about this 15% reduction that they're going to have because they don't have any need for it. And they're not wanting to pay pain for a risk. They don't think that Russia poses any risk to them at all. And, you know, and as Jackie pointed out, this could have complicating effects on the economy throughout Europe and could cause even more compounding effects. And Russia has the potential to completely cut off this gas if they want to play that card, which could throw things into even more chaos. And all of this because you know, Russia doesn't want us to impose the economic sanctions on them for the war against Ukraine, which they view as an issue between the two of them. And that's going to be over time. How much pain are we willing to pay economically and personal lifestyles for a war that really, as I argue, can't be won by Ukraine?
So if that is the case, and the Russians are certainly acting like it's the case, and Vladimir Putin is delighting at seeing Europe in disarray and talking about rationing gas, isn't he kind of winning this thing?
Well, he certainly is on the upside right now. But, you know, there's no question that Russia is really suffering a lot on their own. I mean, their own economy, these sanctions do hurt them, and it hurt them a lot. But, you know, Russia has a history of their people being able to endure a lot. And they were prepared for some of this, I think, before this even happened.
And he's clearly waiting for the other side to blink, right? I mean, you said that before. He can go this long for a while. He felt confident enough to leave Russia, to go to Iran, confident that he'd have a country to return to. No one would try to overthrow him. No one has that we know of. What do you make of just that?
Yeah, I think that really does say a lot because he is playing for time. That's why they're using this slow, methodical process of attacking the Donbass, especially because they don't want to risk the troops that they have in these large armored assaults like they did in the first phase of this war very unsuccessfully, because they know they can afford that. They keep imposing 1,000 casualties per day on some days against the Ukrainian troops. And then they take methodical, maybe 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, 5 kilometers per day in some of these areas, but they don't give it back in any of these cases so far in any real capacity that's remained. So Putin believes that he can keep going with that status for a long time, and they could go easily into next year with their economics and their military capacity and their personnel, their rounds, their artillery, all of those things. But it's not clear that the West can match that. And I think that's really where this war is going to be won or lost.
Danny, well, real quick while I have you, the Russians are pulling out of the International Space Station by 2024, this thing that they've been doing with us for the better part of 2 decades. Now it's presumably just us. China, as we know separately, is going its own space station route and going to the moon and all of that. What do you make of all of this?
Well, it's going to be, you know, a problem for us because we had planned on using that thing through 2030.
Right.
And this, you know, it's in 2 parts where we provide basically the power and the Russian side provided the propulsion to keep the thing in space. So if the Russians pull out of it, it's not clear how we can continue to maintain and operate that thing because it's on the Russian side, and I don't know how we would just do that. NASA's examining these things right now to try to come up with an answer. But it could potentially be pretty problematic for our future space exploration.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I mean, this thing is a heck of a lot bigger than Skylab was, and that eventually went into the atmosphere and burnt away and landed in parts of Australia, I believe, in the outback area. But what can you see happening to that thing? It's gargantuan now.
Right, yeah, and apparently Russia just a month or two ago was arguing that, hey, if you don't do something to change this, I mean, the thing could fall, and it doesn't go over Russia. It could fall on India, I think was the threat that they used. They said, you want that on your hands, because they said, we're not at risk, but your people are. So we've got that to worry about, too.
Yeah, incredible. And probably in your career, the more you've seen things change, the more they sadly stay the same. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Davis, very good seeing you again, my friend.
Always my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Neil.